What up, family? Welcome back to another episode of Jarvis Hill Projected. You know what it is. This is our mental health once a month conversation. Get your head in the game. Where we bring different topics about mental health. Well, this particular topic, we're going to be talking about marriages. It's been a lot going on these last couple of years, the pandemic, and how has that impacted marriages. So we're going to have a good, healthy dialogue around that tonight. So you guys join us. As always, I have with me the expert, the mental health expert, the one, the man, the myth, the legend. He's here with us tonight. Mr. Brandon Jones, what's going on, my brother?
Not much, man. You're putting a lot of sauce on it, man. I don't know if I can step up to the plate to be the man, the myth, and the legend. All right, but we'll see what I can do.
Yeah,
I'm doing
man.
well, man. I'm doing well.
Yeah, so I also just want to, for my viewers too, I just want to shout out that Brandon, you also have a podcast called This, That, and the Third, right?
Right. Yeah, the third podcast with myself, my guy Aaron, and my home girl Kai. The three of us, we have a podcast. It's over on my YouTube channel, which is Brandon Jones, or you can search Jegna Institute. That's Jegna. You can find us over there, and we just discuss various different topics. We're really aiming at helping folks become more successful in today's time. We take a couple of current events and we discuss those, but we've really been pumping hard on where the current state of things are, like finances, looking at inflation, talking about what does success look like. We even had an episode on Kevin Samuels because of the impact he's made in this social space. So yeah, man, we're over there trying to do constructive work to the best of our ability.
No, you're doing it because I've been checking out the show myself. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not. Look, what's the saying? I'm not only the president, but I'm a fan too. So I've been
Yeah.
checking you out, man. So doing a great work. So we're happy to have you on Jarvis Hill Projected, having a once a month conversation about the mental health. And actually, this month is mental health. So it's right in line with what we kind of continue to build and talk about, get your head in the game. Um,
Got it.
so like we always like to say, let's get down to business. You guys know what to do. Before we get started, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. So we're gonna keep out bringing this good content information to you guys. All right, Brandon, we're gonna be talking about marriage tonight. So first question or topic I wanted to just talk about is the phases of marriage. The first thing we like to talk about is everybody has that honeymoon stage. The honeymoon phase.
Right.
But after that, what phases do we go through? Just give us the overview of that before we kind of dive too deep into it.
Yeah, and there are definitely several different perspectives on this. I'll give you what I've seen through my own marriage, through being a therapist and a counselor to folks who've been in marriage counseling, premarital, and who've been at the brink of divorce. I have had some clients who have actually got divorced. So what I would say is this: you definitely start off with that honeymoon phase, and the honeymoon phase, I think, is a couple different phases in one, because you have that first part, which I call the chase. That's when
Yep.
you're dating. You just starting to learn about the individual. You might have known them before and y'all reconnected, right? It's the chase. It's getting back infatuated with one another. And then from the chase, then it leads into like an engagement. So we talk about marriage. So the engagement is that next step. And then the engagement is another level of excitement, right? It's like, oh, I want to make you my wife, or I'm going to be your husband, or whatever the case may be. And that's another heightened level of the honeymoon phase. And then from that engagement to whatever duration of time till we get to the wedding, then the wedding is another high. It's like another bump. And then you get excited about that. We have this, you might have a ceremony, you might not, but you're eloping, and then you actually might have an actual honeymoon. So it's all this buildup that takes place earlier in the relationship. From that buildup, the honeymoon phase can last for maybe another year or so, depending on how you set up. For myself, our honeymoon phase, I would say probably lasted about a year, but we went from marriage to pregnant, and that was done deliberately. So we had a kid right away. And, I would say that our honeymoon phase probably lasted about a year, but probably about midway through that, it was like full on, I'm a pregnant mother. I need to figure out what this is like. And we didn't have children. It was our first kid together. So
Okay.
that's a whole nother phase, right? Is do you become parents or do you not? What I would suggest is that when people get married, that they take at least 2 years to understand what marriage means to them. And I think that gets missed a lot for folks, especially if they hop into kids real quick, or they already had kids before, prior to getting married or whatever the case may be, that dynamic ends up shifting. So we have that honeymoon phase that can last anywhere between dating to engagement all the way to maybe about a year or two into the actual marriage. From there, it's a discovery phase. You're learning how to be a husband. You're learning how to be a wife. Hell, you might be learning how to be parents or co-parenting or blending families or whatever the case may be. You're in discovery mode, and that's where things get tricky. A lot of marriages end up being unsuccessful within like the first 4 to 6 years. That's because the discovery doesn't always meet the expectations that happen in the honeymoon phase. So you're trying to understand who you are in the dynamic, the other person trying to understand who they are in the dynamic, and y'all had expectations on each other that you may not have talked about, or they haven't actually crossed paths, and now you're bumping heads. But I think that there's an element of growth and development in this phase, but you have to work on it. You have to be able to share your expectations, be transparent, talk about what your boundaries are as you discover them, and be able to articulate them to the person, which means that what? As an individual in the dynamic, you have to be able to have active listening, be willing to hear some hard truths, right? Like, hey, you gained some weight since we've been together. Like that's something that people they get very frustrated with. It's like, dang,
Yeah,
you love me at one point in time, you'll love me now. It's like we've been together for 4 years, stuff changed, right? And this is what ends up happening in a lot of dynamics. So that discovery phase, I think, lasts till about year 7 if you get that far. Year 7 is when we have what we call the 7-year itch. Have you ever heard of that? The seven
yeah.
year itch.
Look, go ahead.
All
You,
right.
you right, go ahead. Talk to it.
So the 7-year itch, and I think this is a human dynamic thing because it's so common, and you see it amongst various different ethnic groups. It's definitely a Western concept for sure, where in the United States we see it happen all the time. And the 7-year itch is when people start to question if should I still stay in this marriage? Do I still have it? Which is like, can I still go out there and date, or can I pull somebody? Am I still attractive, etc.? And a lot of times, people actually act on those kind of desires. They'll actually start flirting with people, going out more. They might get a little, work husband or a work
So,
wife or something
so
of
look,
that
so
nature.
look, so look. Let me interject because that you leading to another question. So
Go ahead.
we're talking about the framework of the marriage. So then, what are some sources of infidelity, which I think you're about to touch on now? So continue.
Yeah. So at the 7-year itch thing, one of the main sources of infidelity is people's own insecurities. They want to feel loved. They want to feel touched and
Mm,
seen. They want attention. So when they don't feel like their partner is giving it to them, they seek it from elsewhere. We see
okay.
this a lot with again, this goes back to that discovery phase. If you had expectations in your marriage that things are supposed to go a particular way, and that person has not delivered on those expectations, a lot of times we don't communicate those to one another, then now you're seeking that validation elsewhere without actually working on it at home. So it's like, damn, she don't love me no more, she don't care. Well, I'm about to go out here, see if I still got it. Right? You might see somebody, they might get a new vehicle, they might start dressing a little different, they might get some new cologne, and then they out here, right? Then they seeing if they still got some game. They flirt with people. They might even get a number. They might slide in a DM. They're just making sure that, hey, am I still attractive to the people that I'm attracted to at this point in time? A lot of times that 7-year itch leads to a lot of turmoil in relationships. People start
Mm,
arguing and fighting a lot more. This is when divorces start showing up. People start questioning, did they make a mistake? Why did I even get married to this person in the first place? So you start to see these things show up around that like 7-year state. If you can manage that rocky terrain and you can move beyond it and you get towards that decade of being together, now you're questioning yourself like, damn, I've been with somebody this long. It's like we've been together for a whole decade. 10 years is a long time. This year is actually my 10th anniversary with my wife. And when
happy
we think about
anniversary,
it, it's
man.
like, yeah, thank you. Yep, we're gonna be approaching 10 years marriage in August. And we think back about it like, man, that 10 years went by quick. Like it went by so quick. I don't even know where 10 years went. And now we are in that phase of rediscovery in the marriage again. So you have that discovery of who you are as husband and wife. You get past that 7-year itch, now you're looking at longevity in your marriage. What do we want this next 10 years to look like? You may have children. Our children are getting older. We're going to have a preteen here pretty soon. We're starting to think about what does life look like down the line. Also, this is typically the female's point in the relationship. They want new rings. They want
Uh-oh.
to
Okay.
redo things.
Put a ring
it's
on it.
time
Another
to
ring on
it's
it.
time to update everything. And it's so funny how that works out, right? It's like, all right, it's time. I need to do this. I need to do that. They want to renew vows. They want everything new. They want to be remarried again,
Okay.
right? And that again, I think that's some lingering of that 7-year itch. Is like I want to feel the feeling I had when we first got together now because I'm in a new area of discovery in my own life.
Yeah.
So a lot of times in that 10 years, those women are usually what in their mid 30s, maybe even 40s, hell, sometimes even in their 50s, around that 10-year span. And they want to know, that you still love them, that kind of spunk is still there, that chase is still there. So that reinvention, that new ring, that renewing the vows and all that, is just to make them feel validated in this next chapter in the marriage. And then you move through that, and then you get into kind of like the midlife crisis of everything. And I think that at this point, once you start hitting year 13, 15 plus, you're starting to look back at yourself as an individual for a long time, almost half my life at this point.
Yeah.
I'm growing with this person. What do I need from myself? This is where that midlife crisis comes in. Women want to go get some surgery done on their body. They might want to get a breast lift, right? They might want to go get a BBL at this point. They start changing their hairstyles, right? They want to go on cruises. They want to start doing things for them. Leave the family back at home and take care of me. They got to go into Vegas and all types of stuff. Then what do men do? We start getting new trinkets. Oh, it's time to get that convertible. It's time to get that 2-seater. It's time to get that motorcycle, right? We want to dress a little younger. We want to start going out a little bit more. We might even pick up new hobbies because we're starting to fill back into our own cups. We have security in the marriage, so now it's time to make sure that my insecurity is taken care of. Because
Mm.
I'm with you. I've been with you.
I got you.
You're here. Yeah. Now, what about me? What about me, Poe? I want to take care of myself. I want to make sure that I'm good so that I can keep moving forward with you. And then you get past that 15-year hump and you're getting into 20 years. Talking about legacy at this point. At this point, there may be grandchildren. Your children may be a little older. You're starting to look at life a little different. Now your response to family is different. You're not the caretakers anymore. Now you can still do things, but now it's more like fun stuff. This is why when you're a parent, and I'm sure your children have their grandparents, and when grandparents come, they don't give a damn about nothing, man. They'll start giving your kids a whole pint of ice cream, buying them everything. They just go all out for their grandchildren. Well, why is that? Because it's just them at this point. They don't have that direct responsibility anymore. So their love comes through showering and supporting the family from a different angle. And that's what their relationship starts to become about. It starts to become about companionship. So them being together, taking care of each other. They may be having illnesses or just getting old, slowing down. So they're taking care of one another. But then it's like, how are we going to shower this love amongst the family? And that's when you start to see like grandparents really stepping in, doing things.
Yeah.
They want to take the kids for a whole week during the summer, stuff like that, because now their love is more spread out. So we go through these phases where it's about us. Then it's about, is this the right thing for us? Then it's about, okay, what's the next phase for us? Then it's about me. I got to focus on my stuff. Then it's about the legacy that we created and how do we push this on as we go. And that's lifespan part. That's like lifespan partnership, 101, where you see this human dynamic take place in various different cultures. It shows up over and over and over again.
Man, that was beautiful, man. If I could give you a standing virtual ovation, man, I would. No, because I get it, man. Like, we'll be celebrating 15 years of marriage this year in July. Right. So, we're in there, and I can definitely relate to a few of those things that you said: rediscovery, discovering yourself, your significant others going through some changes. How do you re-engage with that person? And everything that you laid out, man, was on point. So that's, guys, if you're following, I appreciate, if you tapped in live, I appreciate it. Make sure you say something in the chat so we can shout you out. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. What's up, Billy? I see you live. We got some other people, but if you guys have any questions, make sure you drop in the chat. So let's bring it back to present day, right? We just went through a pandemic and people couldn't travel, couldn't go anywhere. You know what I mean? So You there with your significant other, you there with your husband, you there with your wife, you there with your partner, whatever, right? You're there. But then you also coming out of that, you see divorce rates are going up. Talk about the impact that the pandemic had on marriages.
Yeah, I mean, the main impact that the pandemic had on everything is just increased stress levels. So what happens in a lot of families when you are extremely stressed out, you take out those frustrations on the people that are closest to you. And when we are in, I don't want to say we were forced because we weren't 100% forced, but when we are, highly encouraged to stay indoors and not go out and not have outlets to do things,
Right.
you're going to be stressed out. You're going to get tired of watching Netflix with your partner. You're going to get tired of playing board games. You're going to get tired of them showing you stuff that's happening on social media. And you're going to want something different. And I think that we had over 2 years of just kind of being stuck within this like enclosed space with our significant others where we didn't have a lot of outlets. Now, that wasn't every couple, but a lot of them were struggling. Some couples were rediscovering themselves, right? It's okay, here we
Right.
are. What do we want our lives to be like? What now that we have this time together, because I don't have to commute to my job, or maybe I lost my job, right? And we're here, what do we want to do, right? One of the things that happened in my marriage and in my home is we just start having like these COVID projects that just took place. Like this room, you can hardly tell because it's a little dim in here, but this is a blue room. This was a COVID project. My wife was just like, "Hey, if we gonna be here, you gotta take." This was my man cave. She was like, "This is gonna become our office, and I'm gonna make it look good." So I was like, "That's cool." Now I didn't realize because I had to go into the office one day. I went in the office. I came back home like that 8 hours, and this whole room was painted. And then she started decorating, and I was like, "Oh my god, here we go." No, but it was very relieving because it really made this space different. It made the space vibrant. The kids start coming here. When it was my man cave, there wasn't nothing on the walls. I had a big old jumbo TV in here. I had the PlayStation connected. I had my whole setup, man. When it was
The
UFC
whole
night,
thing is
don't
gone.
even come in here. Yeah, all that was gone. She was like, "You gotta get rid of that TV." She made sure that was in the garage. It was like it was a wrap, bro. So it was, but again, and that's one thing I didn't talk about. But in marriage, there is a lot of sacrifice that takes place for it to work, and you got to give and you got to take. There is an exchange within marriage. And did I want to give up my space and my spot? No, but I did, and what it ended up doing was creating a better environment for the family. Now, my kids were home because they had the remote learning thing. They would come in here. There's a couch in here now. There wasn't a couch here before. It was just a big gaming chair. And they come in here, they chill with their dad. We do some homework. I have to hop up my Zoom calls. They're like, all right, Dad, I'll come back after you're done. They head out. It was a different type of vibe that was set up in this space. And that's just something that happened during COVID. And we started getting plants in the house. Now, my wife's always had kind of like this little baby green thumb where she wanted to do plants. But during the pandemic, it just got crazy, man. We got like 13, 14 plants up at this
Oh
joint
wow.
now. And yeah, I mean, it just found something to do. I don't care nothing about no plants. But when my wife got before we ended up having a child during the COVID too. But when my wife was in the hospital, somebody needed to take care of those plants. She was in the hospital for almost a month, so I had to take care of the plants. And believe it or not, that was one of the more relieving parts of my day. Was walking around this damn house, watering all these plants and putting all this stuff in them and checking all these putting this little sticky thing in there. And I'm doing that, and I'm like, man, this is actually calming and it's reconnecting because my wife is gone. She's ill, getting ready to have our baby, and I'm home taking care of the whole house. So there was these opportunities during the pandemic for rediscovery and growth just within our own household. And I know that there are other couples who have similar things like that as well. So, I would say overall, the pandemic has caused significant amount of stress for so many people. Financial things have gone down, housing insecurities. Right now we're having a baby formula shortage. I can only imagine what that's doing to parents, especially those first time parents who are
Absolutely.
struggling to breastfeed and stuff like that. So the pandemic is having real impacts on people's relationship dynamics. But I don't think it was all doom and gloom. But for a lot of people, the stress level is extremely high.
Man, okay. So moving forward with like social media, right? So let me ask
Mhm.
you a two-part question about social media and marriages. So social media. I mean, everything is now on social media. There is no hidden things about everything is being exposed, right? So
Right.
you got one aspect of it. You looking at these men, you looking at these women on social media, But then let's say the other side to that is you have someone who's always on social media, and the other party is there like want to connect and have a conversation, but the other person is always scrolling through the phones, checking out. So talk about the impact of social media on marriages in today's world.
It's deep, man. I mean, social media is the cause of a lot of frustration, a lot of relationships ended. I mean, I remember one of my last clients before I stopped practicing clinically was this couple. I remember an older couple. They were like in their late 40s, and the husband was complaining that the wife was on her phone all the time, and he kept saying she keeps telling all our business. Every time something happens, she posts it, and then her cousins hop in, and her
Everybody's
sisters got
talking about
something
it.
to
Everybody
say.
knows business.
And he's just like, I can't have one disagreement with my wife without everything being broadcasted. And then her thing was, well, I don't got nobody to talk to deal with any of this. So I understood that too. So it was like I got both of their sides of the story. And my goal was to help them figure out better ways to deal with both of those things, because you don't want to just display all your dirty laundry out there like that. And once you post that stuff, it's out there. So,
Out there.
yeah, it's out there. And ultimately, what ended up happening was they gave each other ultimatums. He was like, "You gonna stop posting our stuff, or I'm gonna leave you." She was like, "You gonna get off my case about it, or you can just leave. I don't even care. It's her house. It was the house in her name. All this, right?" And ultimately, they ended up getting divorced over social media. Like they just couldn't come to an agreement on how to better deal with their frustrations with one another because of Facebook. And that's just one casualty, one cautious tale of how social media can drive your relationships down the tube. But I think we have to keep in mind that there is a generational understanding when it comes to social media and relationships that we have to understand. I would say boomers, Generation X, and about half of the millennials, like the older half, those folks are going to be a little less tolerant of how social media shows up in their relationship.
That's right.
For those lower end millennials, those Gen Zs, and now they call the alphas, which are like these kids who were born in like 2010 and stuff, who are already 13, which sounds nuts.
It's crazy.
Their dynamic, their relationships start online, so a lot of them don't date unless they introduce themselves or connect via some social media app or dating app.
Right.
Where literally just go when you go to the mall, just watch them. Watch what happens. It's not let me get your number anymore. It's well, let me follow you on Snap. What's your TikTok? Let me get your IG, because that's where the relationship starts. So for them, social media is not a problem in their relationships because that's how they're connected anyway. But for folks who are a little bit on the older end, I would say 35 plus, social media plays this kind of dicey dynamic because
Yep.
there's a lot of mistrust that happens on social media. This is why couples want to see each other's phone and get passwords, because we want to know who you texting, who you following, who you doing this and that to. And then people are making, Finsta accounts, which is like a fake account. So you can talk to all the honeys on one account or all the guys on one account. Then you got the other account that's just for display, right? And it's like, this is what ends up happening in a lot of relationships. So social media can be extremely dangerous in relationships. But again, I think there's a generational factor here that we have to keep in mind. So if you're somebody, let's say you're a millennial, but you want to date a younger person, somebody who's like 26, they're going to be on their phone. And if you're not, let's say you're 38 and you're trying to date a 26-year-old, they're going to be on their phone. And if you can't keep up with, what's happening on Instagram for them, you might get lost in the sauce. And that may be frustrating for you, but that's just where they're at as far as their dynamic.
Gotcha. Okay. You kept saying the word generational, which is one of my questions. So let's say a generational, you have a parent who's been divorced multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are in your relationship, fighting against that. My dad has been divorced multiple times, or my mom has been divorced multiple times. Do you think that's like a generational curse that you're trying to break that? You get into a situation and arguing, fussing all the time, and all of a sudden, you find it more easier to separate because you've seen that, or do you fight against it because you've seen the impact of your parents separating? Or your dad been through multiple divorces? How do you look at that?
That's a great question. I think you can go either way. I think you will get some people who are like, you know what, my dad or my mom has been divorced 2 to 3 times, and I don't want that. I want to make sure that no matter what happens in our marriage, we're gonna fight through it. Or you get those people who's like, divorce ain't nothing. Like I seen my mom get divorced, my dad, they've been divorced with each other. Then the next partner they divorce, it ain't nothing, and that's okay. So I think you can see it on either end of the spectrum how people may respond to how divorce shows up for them. But what we do know is that divorce can and often does have a detrimental impact on children's development. So when people get divorced and you got kids, I mean, literally, it can be the age as young as 3 years old, all the way up to early 20s. Where when those parents actually get divorced, those kids start to blame themselves sometimes. They start to develop anxiety symptoms, even sometimes even depressive symptoms because their parents have chosen not to be together. So family dynamics are important and they do play a huge role in role modeling how to show up in relationships. So we have to be very intentional about how we engage in our dialogue and how our behaviors are as parents to our children because it can have a huge impact. Especially, like, think about this. Some families they might have this kind of like facade where they just seem perfect on the outside. People would never know
Yep.
that mom and dad are arguing. And then, you got a kid there in the 10th grade, and all of a sudden, mom and dad, they're gone. Dad done moved out. And the kids are like, what the hell happened? Because no one talked to them about anything. And it was all kept under wraps. And now they're just in turmoil. They're just spinning because they're like, the family's changed. We don't know what's going on with our dad. He just left, or mom just left and then now they're just spinning. And I've seen that happen with a lot of folks. And there are some kids who are extremely oblivious to what mom and dad have going on in the dynamic. And then there's some kids who know exactly what's happening. But I think, all in all, it's important for us, if you do get divorced, no matter how many times, that you explain that to the children, no matter how old they are, so they understand each parent's perspective on what actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to someone the other day. He had to be about 35 to 38 years old. And he was just talking about how frustrated he was that his parents just were separated. Now, here
Mm-hmm.
was a grown man just talking about how upset that his parents getting divorced and separating. And he was just like, what's going on after all these years? Y'all couldn't keep it together. And him, his sisters, and his other brother, they were all like distraught behind it and they were hurt. So I can only imagine a child, and I didn't think about this like as a grown man, the impact of seeing your parents going through divorce as you're 35 to 38 years old, how it still impacts you.
Mm-hmm.
So another
Mm-hmm.
question for you, kind of switching gears on you a little bit, Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
Trust in a relationship and marriage. Let's say
Yeah.
once that trust is broken, man go out and cheat, the woman goes out and cheat. How does one comes back from that, or do they come back from that?
Yeah, the best way to come back from trust being broken and betrayal is you got to show up every day. You got to be transparent about what happened and show up every day and prove to either party that you're not going to do those things again. And that's a hard thing to do because a lot of people, once they've been betrayed, man, there ain't no turning back. And some people just close off on people when they do that. So you have to be consistent in your actions. You have to be transparent in what you're doing, and sometimes you just have to prove to the other person that you are, sincerely sorry for what happened, and you're ready to move on. But it takes time. Like that's the thing that a lot of people don't. It
Yeah,
doesn't work out because they don't realize this may take 2 or 3 years for me to actually trust you again. Man, betrayal is it's a strong emotion. We don't talk enough about it.
right, right.
But when you confide it in somebody and they step out on you and cheat on you, and don't let it be like somebody you know or a friend or somebody they suspect and they get it right. It just makes the betrayal even worse. So
Yep.
it's important, when that trust is broken, if you want to maintain in a relationship with that person, that you start that both people come clean about what's happened, be sincere in their apology, and then their actions have to speak louder than their words.
Yeah. So is it from the standpoint of like they say, men cheat because it's physical, women cheat because it's like mental. So talk about that for a second. Which way does it go? Is it a little bit of little
I,
mixture of both or
yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both for both, because a lot of men cheat because they feel like they're not getting what they want to get at home. Now, some men cheat because they just have access and they can. That's very true, but that's not most reason why men cheat.
that's right. Yeah.
Most most of the time, men end up cheating because yeah, it's physical because they're lacking the physicality at home. But when you are lacking the physicality at home, that starts weighing in on your mental. You know, why she don't want me? You know, oh, I ain't good enough for her. I'll show her. Like that's all in your mind. Like that's insecurity just from a masculine frame. And what ends up happening is we go out there and we get some. Now we say it's physical from a man's perspective because a lot of times we don't always build that emotional connection to the person we end up having sex with. It can be very transactional for many men. Now, on the flip side, with women, that's a little different because women usually lead sexually from an emotional standpoint. Now, for some women, it's straight physical, and a lot of women are just nymphos, like they're just trying to get it on, and that's it, and that's okay. They want to get their freak on, let them get their freak on. But typically, when women cheat, there is an emotional attachment because that's how they lead with their intimacy. So, you know, that level of insecurity because their husband ain't paying attention to them or they ain't touched them in months or you know, they start thinking, well, did I gain too much weight? Am I not ugly? This person don't like me no more. And then they go get that validation from somewhere else. And especially in today's society, where there's a lot of empowering messages for women all over the place,
Yeah.
don't be surprised if your wife, if you ain't giving her the attention she needs, that she steps out and starts having a hot girl summer and being a city girl, getting it cracking with her mega knees. Like it can pop off really easily and there's people out there that do not care about sleeping with your wife. Actually, they want to because it gives them a little extra boost in their confidence.
So listen, let me just reset because this I'm telling you, family, this conversation is designed to help marriages and talk about it. I think we don't have enough healthy dialogue around it. Brandon, let's talk about how the construct of marriage. We talked about that. So I've been married 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen what a successful marriage looked like from in the household growing up. Right, grew up in a single parent
Yeah.
household. So, like I told my wife, we're driving on the road that we're paving. Everything we're experiencing from a marriage perspective is new. So we just made a point to always come to the table and be transparent and talk about it up front. That's how we kind of navigate our situation. Like, hey, what's going on in your mental? And I
Right.
remember when the way I grew up, it wasn't showing love to women in that way, right? It was the way I seen how men treated women. It wasn't in a marriage type of environment. So I grew up with not trusting women. So when I got married, it was always where you going, what you doing, you know what I mean? And then I was always getting my feelings. I would never communicate. It was all mental. But then I learned to make sure I express myself because men, we have feelings too, right? We want to be pampered too. We want to feel a certain type of way too from our woman. So from that standpoint, what does successful marriages look like? Because we can talk about, all these different things, and sometimes a successful marriage can look like failure, but what does it look like from an overall standpoint from your lens, Brandon?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I think so. I'll say this, and then I'll give what I think are some commonalities. A successful marriage is very subjective to the couple, because some people, there may be things that I think don't apply to my marriage to be successful, but for other people may be open to it. Like, like people who have like polyamorous relationships. I don't think that's gonna work in my relationship. But for some other folks, that's the glue that keeps it together. And that's ain't nothing wrong with that as long as both parties is in agreement with it, and that's what rolls. But in my marriage, I don't think that's really for me or for my wife at this point in time where we're at. So I would
Yeah,
say,
think about that.
yeah, I mean, it could change. It could definitely change. Like,
No,
we approaching 10 years, and the next 10 we could be a completely different couple, and that's the fluidity, and that's one of the answers is like marriages are about discovery. I mentioned that several times,
yeah.
but it's about being able to develop and grow with one another. And I think most successful marriages, people have had these moments where they went from loving each other at this high peak to not liking each other very much, to rediscovering that they do care about each other, to fighting and getting frustrated, to learning, and then it's like this flow that ends up happening. Most successful marriages that I know, they had those up and down periods, and they've been able to rally around things that kind of made them understand why they got together in the first place. I've had it in my marriage. We had 2015 is probably the worst year of my life. Like, I don't talk about it a lot. I kind of let that year go because it was just like the worst thing. And then my wife got pregnant in the middle of it. And I'm like, I'm about to leave this woman. And then we have one sexual encounter in like the last 4 months, and she gets pregnant. I'm like, oh my god, like
Wow.
like that was how bad it was. I was like, I'm trying to figure out how we're about to do co-parenting with our daughter. We end up having one good day, and boom, she gets pregnant. I'm like, I gotta get out of here. But that's how it is though. And then it was like, okay, how do I reset this? Like, I'm not in a good space. She's obviously not in a good space, and she's pregnant now. There's some work that needs to be done. I can't change her. I have to work on myself. And in most marriages, that's what ends up happening is both parties have to do some work to continue to be with one another. And for me, it was just rediscovering like what is manhood and masculinity for me because I was really outside of myself
Right,
in my
right.
marriage, and I had to define what is a husband to me because what I was doing was not act like a husband. I was just in my emotions to a way too deep extent where it was not even functional in many different aspects. I know I wasn't being a good therapist at the time. I was definitely burnt out at work. Um, at that time I had finished school, so I was done with school. But I was like at home, I just felt like incomplete. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I'm just showing up for my daughter, barely ain't even talking to my wife. It was just miserable. But in order to get through that, I had to focus on myself. So long story short, is in successful marriages, both parties have to work on themselves and define what is a husband and what is a wife. And when they define those two things, do those two things match the expectations that they both have? So that's very important because what my wife expects from a husband and what I think a husband should be, if those things don't match, that relationship is rocky. And that's how we ended up in that space that we were in. Because I went in with this completely like 50-50 mindset, like I'm gonna be the good guy. And my wife
Yep.
was like, no, bro, I want you to handle them bills. I like working, but if I don't have to, I'll definitely stay home and make this a happy home for everybody. And I was like, no, like you need to pay your half of the rent. She was like, nah, you need to pay all that rent. Like, and then I was like, damn, is this really what she wants? And then we had to change our lifestyle to make sure that if that's what you want, it's going to come with some sacrifices for myself and you. And if this works for us, then we're going to keep it moving forward. And that's what ended up happening. So it's about growth. It's about development. It's about being very transparent with one another. And I think also it's about being able to persevere through the rough patches. No, I don't think any marriage has been perfect where there's been no arguments and no downtimes and none of that. Like when you go through them rough patches, when you can rally and support one another and get through those, that's what makes a successful marriage.
I think, man, you hit on a lot of key points, and because I can speak to that person with being married for 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
it is one of the most ugliest, beautiful things I've ever experienced. And when you talk about those ebbs and flows, you're absolutely right. But now sitting back in the seat that I'm in now is I can recognize when we're down, but I can recognize it and not be emotionally down. You know what I mean? Like I can
Mm-hmm.
quickly navigate us back up to the top or stay at the top long enough to say, okay, I know where the unit is down, but I'm mentally still up. So I'm gonna make sure that we get back up because we're gonna make it through. You know what I mean? Because we don't talk about that enough. It's a job. It's work. It's consistent conversating, like you say, evolving as an individual to, hey, what do you want to accomplish this year?
Right.
Okay, these are the things that I want to do. What do you want to do? Talking to your
Right.
wife. And then you merge those two worlds together because when you get married, depending on what age, if you're younger, you do go through a thing. You change, whether there's life experiences on your job, you're dealing with different people, you're changing. Your environment is changing you. But you come
Mm-hmm.
home to this person, not realizing 10 years from now, you married a person 10 years ago, they're not the same person.
No, not at
You know what
all.
I mean? And 5 years from now, they won't be the same person because time has changed them, their experience has changed them, especially if you guys have kids now. So all that takes account of it, man. And I think again, it's just healthy to have this conversation. Last question for you, Brandon. When
Mm-hmm.
it comes to money and finances, do you think it's best to keep everything separate, or because you just touched on the second point?
Yeah.
I want to just ask that question: is hey, should we combine and build together, or we separate and divide and conquer?
Yeah, again, it depends on the couple. There are some couples where they can have separate bank accounts and just do fine. And there are some couples where one other person needs to like manage the money. And I would say no matter which direction you go, as long as both parties understand, like have clear expectations for what the money's used for, well, how much money's where does the money go, then I think you're in good shape. And like I stated, I'll give an example of my own marriage. When we started off with the 50-50 thing, we got joint bank account right after we got married. We I ended up I had several accounts myself. My wife only had one, so she was not, doing the best with her money in the first place. And what ended up happening, we just had a joint bank account, and there was times where that direct deposit hit, and then she's hitting a direct withdrawal, and I'm just like, whoa, where'd that money go? Like, hold on, we got bills to pay, and it's like that can't happen, right? That can't. No communication. You get your check. You done took 90% of the check out of the account. Like, hold on, we got things to pay here. And when I realized that, oh, she's not the greatest with money. Like I kind of knew, but I had to like see it and feel it before I was like, all right, we
Now
gotta
you
do something.
did. You
Yeah, I was
discovered
like,
something.
I was like, look, we gotta rethink this thing. And at this point, we made some shifts. We still got a joint account, but she's got more accounts now because I've helped her figure out her stuff, and I got my accounts. But we have a joint account where we handle all family stuff in it, and that's the important piece of how I think that it can work is at least one joint account. So matter even if it's just a savings account. So if there's a rainy day or something ends up happening, y'all both know, oh, we can go to that pot of money and handle our business if we need to. So I think every couple has a different kind of flow when it comes to the finances, but as long as there's clarity, people kind of know where we're at, and no one feels abused financially. Like that's something we don't talk about, but there are people who keep people captive based on money. It's like I'm gonna keep
Mm,
you broke so you don't go nowhere. Like that is detrimental to someone's mental health, and you should be doing stuff like that. That's extremely abusive behavior.
that's right, man. Listen, family, I told you guys, these conversations are important and they're needed. And that's why once a month we want to tap in and do these mental health conversations called Get Your Head in the Game. And tonight, I think we covered a good amount of mental health perspective from a marriage lens. And we walked through the steps. Brandon talked about the framework, the beginning, middle, and the golden years, right? When you grandparents. But hopefully, this conversation can start the dialogue between the husband and wife or the partners and communicate. People change. Brandon, man, thank you so much, man, for coming on again, sharing your wisdom. Definitely appreciate you. Look forward to the next conversation. But you have any final words, Brandon?
Yeah, I want to share my definition for a healthy relationship. I think that that's important for
Okay.
us to consider when we're thinking about what's healthy, because I think we can identify a lot of characteristics in what's healthy, but when it comes to what's healthy for us, it's hard to define it, right? And when I did my groups, I used to have men's groups doing with young boys all the way up to like grown men. When we talked about healthy relationships, I used to do this exercise, and I used to go to a whiteboard or a flip chart, and I'll say, "Tell me what's in a healthy relationship." And these men would list off like 15 things: loyalty, money, sex, communication, trust, all these things, right? And then I would say, raise your hand if you, in your lifetime, if you've seen a relationship that had all those things in it. No one would raise their hand.
Mm,
Literally, no one raised their hand. So I say, okay, let's say we had 12 things on the board. I say, raise your hand if you've seen a relationship that had 8 of these things in it. Maybe one or two hands would get raised. That's all right. Raise your hand if you've seen a relationship that had at least 5 of these things in it. More hands to be raised. Raise your hand if you've seen at least 3 of these elements in a relationship in your lifetime, whether you were in it or somebody you've seen. And then everybody's hand pretty much will go up towards the end. And I say, you know what? It's interesting that we can identify all these things, but we don't see them. And this is
mm.
pretty much with black folks. But you don't see all this. And I said, why do you think you don't see this? And no one ever had an answer. And I think one of the reasons is because we don't know how to define a healthy relationship, because so many of our relationships for so long whether in our personal lives or in our media, have been so toxic. That's the expectation. So that's the foundation expectation. So that's what people work from, and they think it's okay. So I would ask them, well, when have you seen relationships like this? And guess what they all go to? The Cosby Show. They
Oh wow.
always say the Cosby Show. They always say that's the only time they've ever seen a relationship with all that.
And
The
that's real
Cosby
talk.
Show.
Real talk though.
Which has been off for how long? When did the Cosby Show go off the air? 92? 94 maybe?
Yeah,
Like that's a long time ago. That's a long time ago. So think about that. Most people in their lifetime, let's say they're 35 and up, haven't seen a healthy relationship since the Cosby Show. So what does that say for the folks behind us? So it's important that we identify not just the characteristics, but we also define healthy relationships. So let me do that as we close out. So let me find my definition here. So a healthy relationship is I lost mine. Oh, here it is. It is a bond, a commitment, or contract between two or more parties where everyone involved is benefiting from and sacrificing something constructive, where all parties involved are not being mistreated or harmed in any way. I'm going to repeat that because this could go over some people's heads. It is a bond, a commitment, or a contract, which is what happens when you get married, between two or more parties, because we do have poly relationships, where everyone involved is benefiting from and sacrificing something constructive. So you're getting something and you're letting something go for the benefit of the union, where all parties involved, so everybody involved in this dynamic, are not being mistreated or harmed in any way. When you think about that definition and you think about the relationships in your life, is that true? And that's how you know if you've been in a healthy relationship or not.
Woof. Woof. Yeah. I think family, you're gonna have to rewind that and record it and check it out, because that's not just a marriage, but a healthy relationship. Period. Benefit, sacrificing. Is it a two-way street? Is something going? Is something coming? Brother, that was fire, man. Thank you so much, Brandon. Listen, family, you guys know what to do. Be sure to like and subscribe to Jarvis Hill Projected. And be sure to check out my man Brandon on the third podcast at Brandon Jones, the Jetna. Check him out. Right. Hey, family, thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate y'all always. It's liking, sharing, subscribing. Y'all amazing, rocking with your boy. So listen, we're gonna get off here. Until next time. Peace.
Peace, everybody.